Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Filibuster of 2020. 2020 is of course the year that films such as Edge of Tomorrow, Mission to Mars, Pacific Rim and Reign of Fire were all set in. So we look forward to spending the next year stuck in a time loop, dodging dragons and kaijus before leaving this whole mess behind and head to Mars to escape Brexit, climate change and World War III. I'm your co-host Alice King, and with me to talk to you about the very best and worst that the year has to offer in terms of film, TV and pop culture, it's Lee Hutchison. Happy New Year, and how was your Christmas break?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it was the Christmas break of Little Women, so that's always a positive.
Excellent. Well, of course, there was a few other films. It's the start of the year, so it's always a bit difficult because I was looking at my local film schedules of which to catch, and I'd kind of seen almost everything. Cats, Star Wars, Little Women, all continuing. But there was a couple of new releases, and we're going to talk about those today. So on today's show, we're going to review Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman, and then we're going to talk about JoJo Rabbit by Taika Waititi as well. So first up is The Gentleman, written and directed by Guy Ritchie, fresh off a slightly unexpected billion-dollar hit but uninspiring Aladdin remake. Ritchie returns to the Gangster trilogy that he made his name with. So when drug lord Mickey Pearson, played by Matthew McConaughey, looks to sell off his drugs empire, it sets off a chain of events that could cause his downfall, all described with witty panache by private investigator Fletcher, played by Hugh Grant. So, Lee, was this a case of top man or time gentleman, please?
I can't remember, I think it was you that I had a conversation with maybe a couple months ago where I was like, or it was someone, I had a conversation, I have a chat about films with too many people, and I was like, is The Gentleman a prequel to Kingsman? And I don't know why I had it in my head, maybe sort of the, Guy Ritchie, yeah, I could sort of see him filling in for Matthew Vaughn if he didn't want to continue with the franchise. And then someone just turned around and went, no, it's its own separate thing. I don't even know why I got that idea into my head.
I think it's a valid one, because certainly the teaser poster I saw for The Gentleman, which was basically a glass of whiskey with, I think, an ice cube in the shape of a gun, and even maybe the font of the poster, it does make it look like The King's Man, which I think is the prequel, which is coming out at some point this year. And of course, Matthew Vaughn got his start basically producing Guy Ritchie's films. So, I mean, the two are linked for the rest of time in terms of going down that Cockney gangster route. But yeah, no, I think it's a valid thing to expect at this point. It's difficult to keep up with all these different things. But when you realised it was a Guy Ritchie film, were you excited? Or?
No, not overly, no. I think it was been blitzed, I don't know about it in Aberdeen, but in Edinburgh it's been on the side of every single bus for about 2 months now. Every bus you get or pass has the cast of The Kingsman all just kind of up there, Matthew McConaughey. And I think I pretty much somehow managed to avoid the trailers for it, or it didn't seem to get much of a marketing push in that respect. So I kind of was going in really blind to it. I wasn't even that fussed about going along to see it, truth be told. I think I was just kind of keen to just get out of the house, that sort of Christmas, New Year fatigue where you're like, you lose track of the days, you eat too much cheese. Me and my girlfriend were going to go along and see it, and then she was like, I don't think I can be bothered. And I was like, well, I'm still going to go. I just want to get out of the house and I'm going to go. So I went along, and whether it was sort of low expectations or, perhaps just getting out of the house, watching something that isn't on BBC, Pixar friendly, I quite enjoyed myself. It's definitely a 3.5 out of 5 kind of film. That's no bad thing. But I sat there for just shy of 2 hours and had a really enjoyable time with these characters, the plot, the dialogue, this band of actors that all came together. I found it all made for a pretty enjoyable afternoon, and that was kind of what I was hoping for and what I got, and I can't really complain too much about it. It's going to be pretty disposable and forgettable. We've got a lot of good films coming out in the next few weeks in the UK. This one is not going to be in with that band of them, but I think I just enjoyed it, and it was a kind of fun way to kickstart the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to you, was sort of going in with low expectations. I knew a little bit. I think I'd seen the trailer a couple of times. I think most of it was sort of focusing on Obviously, the big star casting of bringing Matthew McConaughey into this world, and then sort of Hugh Grant clearly having a ball. I know he did A Man from U.N.C.L.E. with Guy Ritchie before, but this is certainly more along the lines of his scenery chewing, hamming it up, sort of Paddington 2 style of thing. And for me, he steals the entire film out from everyone else. Although, he's meant to be a bit part character, but he basically is the de facto storyteller in this. I mean, what did you make of the sort of narrative framing structure of basically having Hugh Grant's private investigator telling Charlie Hunnam the story in respect? Because certainly as it gets towards the end and one of the sort of final scenes, it does sort of seem to me at times that this movie was almost like Guy Ritchie had filmed himself pitching this movie to Miramax, which, I mean, that was actually one of the most surprising things, was when the Miramax logo came up at the beginning, and I went, oh, Miramax are still in business. Because obviously with the whole Harvey Weinstein thing, I thought they'd gone under and sold off all their assets. So the fact that they're still going was a huge surprise. But it did sort of feel like a filmed pitch of Guy Ritchie trying to get this movie made and describing every plot beat. And then he's decided, actually, this would work well if I just got Hugh Grant to talk through it to the audience in that crazy sort of accent and goatee and sunglasses combo that he's got. So what did you make of the narrative storytelling structure?
Well, first with the Miramax side, I thought about making it a little meme myself, but I couldn't be bothered. Where it was just like, that's a name I've not heard in a long time. I noticed that like at the bottom it's like Miramax owned by Bein or something like that. They're one of these sorts of kind of Saudi conglomerates that own sort of like football channels and rights and so on. So they kind of put up Richard Keys and Andy Gray after they were sort of sacked from Sky for sort of sexually inappropriate comments. So they do have a reputation of picking up sort of discarded kind of, maybe something a bit dated and so on.
Right.
So,
it makes total sense now. That's why they enjoyed it, because there is a lot of either sort of homophobic or racial slurs in this film. So therefore, I can understand maybe why they that sort of banter sort of thing. We're all doing it for a laugh, but actually it's kind of offensive to a lot of people. So yeah, I can see why that would fit into their portfolio quite nicely.
Exactly, and I think it was very surprised to see Miramax back and this sort of thing. I think we'll need to obviously we've got this other podcast like the A24 Project, and a few times people have mentioned sort of A24 as maybe being sort of, in a very different way, A24 being the Miramax of this generation, where people will seek out their indie movies based on their kind of distributing it, their name being attached to it. So it was quite interesting to see Miramax, who you think of as doing the sort of the Sundance films, the indie films, the big period dramas, the Oscar baits, kind of having their name admittedly under this sort of rebrand, you could argue, which was a bit slightly jarring, I thought. But I suppose, maybe for people like us, we'll have to maybe get used to seeing Miramax attached to these types of films. For most people, I'm sure they'll just be like, oh, that's just another company.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the structure, the storytelling thing, what did you make of that? Did you enjoy this sort of basically gangster story being narrated by Hugh Grant and sort of nipping in and out? Because he does use several sort of movie style flourishes where he's describing something and then Charlie Hunnam sort of goes, well, actually that wasn't what happened, and then he has to backtrack and stuff like that. So you see sort of people getting killed, but then it turns out they weren't killed, they were just having an argument and stuff like that. So what did you make of that sort of storytelling style by Ritchie?
I didn't really kind of mind it, to be honest. I think it all comes down to that I really enjoyed Hugh Grant's delivery and his way around it. And I think it's one of those ones I was kind of, at first I was watching it as it unfolded, I was like, okay, it's nothing particularly original, it doesn't really add too much, but I'm going to go along with it because of the good performances. I do think, without going into spoilers, I do think it kind of pays off in the third act of being that was quite an enjoyable thing. There was more going on than meets the eye, which was nothing overly new either, but I thought kind of made it a bit rewarding to kind of go down that route. And would I rather have had this film with Hugh Grant in it? Absolutely. So I'm not going to complain too much.
No, I think it, on paper, sort of seeing the different beats and having multiple gangs sort of going after the same sort of thing, it does feel very akin to his early work of Lock, Stock especially, and then you've got some of the sort of more wilder, out there characters of Snatch. But I think by having Hugh Grant doing this sort of storytelling thing, it does manage to put a slightly fresher spin on what could have been slightly overworked, sort of unoriginal material. So I thought that really worked well. And what did you make of the cast? You know, it's pretty much an all-star cast, although I have to say that I have never seen Succession, so everyone I see on Twitter raving about this Jeremy Strong character, he kind of looks familiar, but I'm not entirely sure where I've seen him in the past. But have you seen Succession? Are you in with this new thing that the kids are talking about?
I love Succession. I would be desperate to do a podcast episode or two dedicated to Succession. It is one of the best shows on TV just now, and I eagerly await season 3. So, yes, I think the answer is I stan Succession.
Okay, well, I guess that's me putting that on my watch list now, or getting the box set. So I've got 2 seasons to catch up on now, have I? Okay.
You will blitz it. Absolutely blitz it. But in terms of the cast, I thought I really liked the cast, but it was one of those when you can't help but sort of watch it going, well, there's only really sort of the one out and out female lead, you know, pretty much limited compared to the others. You know, if we take away the character of Laura Pressfield, we've only really got sort of Michelle Dockery as Roz. So it's kind of, you know, failing a little bit.
I
there.
did actually want to talk about
you know,
that. That was one of my points I had written down, which was the representation or non-representation of women in this. Because, yeah, like you say, there's one sort of strung out, junky sort of daughter of a lord, and then you've got the wife character who initially looks like a strong character, but then gets drawn into a slightly awkward, you know, potential. Actually, I'm not going to go into because it's a bit of a spoilers, but it's disappointing how that arc ends towards there, and because it made me sort of think and look back on the rest of his work, and Lock, Stock, yeah, not really any sort of female characters in that. You know, Snatch, I don't think there wasn't any there. Sherlock Holmes, you know, you had sort of Irina Adler in there, so there was some in there, but, you know, I guess Man from U.N.C.L.E. had Alicia Vikander in that, which was a bit of a stronger role. Aladdin, surprisingly, the bumping up of Princess Jasmine's role was my favourite thing about that. So, you know, he can do sort of female characters, so it was a bit of a disappointment that there wasn't more in the way of a stronger female representation, given, of course, the fact that we spent the last year sort of promoting films by women, starring women and stuff like that. I thought that was a bit of a disappointing angle as sort of starting off the year with that. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I get that this is his style and sort of fits in with his, as you say, sort of his earlier films, but, you know, I think audiences are a little bit, you know, I enjoyed the film, but I can see why people might find his gimmick a bit tiring or put them off. I mean, you look at the side of the bus, I don't think, I could be wrong, I don't think Michelle Dockery is on that sort of poster advert that they've got on the side of everything, or if she is, she's just sort of in the background. So, you know, you could be bringing in a new audience, you know, I guess it's maybe replacing some of the parts with sort of female characters, but you might get more people in, and it might not just be the usual kind of crowd. I mean, my audience was largely men. You know, there's some women there with men and stuff, but, you know, there was not, you didn't get much of a diverse crowd in, which is, it could only really go against the film, I think.
Yeah, no, I think the makeup of my audience was actually slightly older. It was probably a lot of couples in their sort of 50s and stuff like that, and I guess slightly worryingly, they were the ones that were laughing the most at all the racial jokes and slurs. So yeah, I guess that ties in with Brexit Britain actually. So, but were there any other sort of standouts in the cast for you? I think for me, I loved sort of, I'm a huge Colin Farrell fan, especially sort of ever since In Bruges and whatever, and I thought he was fantastic in this, in sort of his role. I thought he was great. Were there any other sort of standouts for you?
Colin Farrell was the best one for me. I remembered he was in the film, but like as soon as I sort of sat down to watch it, I completely forgot he was going to be in it. So when he kind of comes in about halfway through, I was really surprised, and I was glad to get him on board. So yeah, he was a real highlight. I thought Matthew McConaughey was good, but he was just sort of doing nothing overly kind of new, but it was just sort of, I thought it was Colin Farrell, Hugh Grant, and Jeremy Strong that sort of stole it for me.
I think I'm pretty much the same, yeah. Sort of Farrell and Grant were the highlights of that. And I mean, do you think there was maybe, so in terms of the whole thing, there was maybe sort of too many sort of plot lines and storylines? I mean, I thought that the sort of Eddie Marzan, sort of editor of a tabloid newspaper thing, I thought almost that could have got trimmed entirely, and it wouldn't really have affected the plot too much. It could have just been a sort of turf war between sort of rival gangs and stuff like that. I thought there was maybe a bit too much in it, and it could have been trimmed down slightly to add for a sort of slightly leaner running time, and I think I probably would have enjoyed it slightly more, I think.
I didn't really have a problem, because I thought it all kind of, the Russian one, I don't want to get into spoilers. I thought that was the one that could have been cut, but it did sort of come together a bit at the end. I didn't really have much in the way of problems with any of sort of the plot lines. Some I was a bit more interested in than others, but I think I'd struggle to cut them out myself. I think everything does get its due in the end.
Cool. So I think you said sort of 3.5 out of 5 for this one, sort of perfectly enjoyable entertainment, but disposable perhaps. It probably won't feature in your top 10 of you, although you might not have many films left in your top 10, given that half of your best of 2019 were 2020 releases.
Well, I just need to go to festivals and see plenty of 2021 things to stuff the ballots with.
So I mean, yeah, I think I rated this one sort of a 2 on Letterboxd. It was kind of enjoyable, but it was not really anything new. I think if it wasn't for sort of Hugh Grant and Colin Farrell, I wouldn't have had as good a time. But it was an interesting release slot for them, sort of going on New Year's Day, because that is traditionally your sort of Oscar potential tentpole releases that are getting that. And we're going to come on to one of those in a second. But I think it was maybe they decided, actually, I think looking back, I think Sherlock Holmes by Guy Ritchie, it got a sort of around about Christmas Day, Boxing Day sort of release. So I guess there is traction for Guy Ritchie to have an audience around this time. And it is certainly refreshingly different to counterpoint to the likes of your Little Women's and your sort of Balls and other sort of Oscar nominees that are going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a recommendation from us, but let us know what you think of that one. But one which is causing quite a bit of a stir at the moment, and one which we kind of briefly talked about during our London Film Festival episode, and that is the anti-hate satire JoJo Rabbit, written and directed by Taika Waititi, in which a member of the Hitler Youth's life is thrown upside down when he discovers that his mother is hiding a Jewish girl in his house, and he must decide what to do with the help of his imaginary friend Adolf Hitler, who is also played by Taika Waititi. Now, we saw this back at London Film Festival in October, and having had time to let it ruminate, is it a case of a box office Hitler or a Nazi movie?
Well, I think me and you were very much in the similar kind of boat here. Like, I think this was one of our hyped films for London Film Festival. We're really keen. I think we're Taika Waititi fans. We've previously enjoyed his work, from Boy to Hunt for the Wilder People, What We Do in the Shadows, and everything in kind of between. And I found the concept and idea quite amusing. I was really curious to see how they would go with it. I expected the film to be tanked sort of by Disney when they took over, because I couldn't see sort of the House of Mouse kind of getting into a film like this potentially. So when I got to see this, I remembered it was like an early morning screening, really excited. My buzz had been a little dented by some of the buzz coming out of, I think it was Toronto, where it was a bit mixed to say the least. And I remembered watching it going like, oh yeah, that was a good start. And then sort of after, it was like, right, I'm sure it'll get going soon. I don't think I'm enjoying it that much. It's okay. And when I always find that I'm trying to convince myself something's okay, or I think that's good, or I'd maybe give it a 3, or maybe something like that, that in reality it's something a little bit worse than that. And I just remembered sort of turning to you at the end of the film going, oh, that was really bad. And I was just, And I can remember like the reaction coming out of our sort of press screening was mixed. Some people were loving it, others were like, "Oh my god, that was terrible." There didn't seem to be very little in the way of, "Yeah, that was a fine 3 out of 5 film," and I think that's kind of continued since with some of the audience reaction and the reviews. There seems to be it's either one or the other. There's no sort of middle ground here.
Yeah, no, there does seem to be a lot of 1-star versus 5-star reviews for this film at the moment. There is, an Oscar push going for it. I'm wondering, I think someone asked a couple of months ago what they thought this year's Bohemian Rhapsody would be, which is what film is going to get loads of nominations and wins despite the fact that it's not actually all that good. And I think it's going to be this one because, I've had time to think about it, and there's always that thing of, well, you got up at like 5-6 in the morning to go and watch an early morning film. You're tired. You might be a little bit grumpy because you've been on the London Underground and stuff like that. But thinking about it, no, I was right in my opinion. I think, this is just our opinion. Clearly there is a lot of people who enjoy it and it works for them, so that's fine. But in our opinion, we didn't like it. I think the problem for me was, like I said, I was intrigued by the trailer. I thought the first trailer that I saw was great. It used, I think it was it like a German cover of like David Bowie and stuff like that, and I'm a Believer, I think, as well. And it looked very funny. It looked like it was less of an anti-hate satire, but just a full-on piss take of the sort of Nazis. It was very sort of Wes Anderson. That's the first thing I got, to the point where I think in my review on a website I called it Moonreich Kingdom, because just the sort of Boy Scout sort of thing and all that sort of stuff. I thought it was weird, but then it starts off very funny, but then it doesn't really go anywhere. And I think the problem for me and several other people that have either read the reviews or stuff too is that when it attempts to then sort of talk about the dangers of the Nazis and the horrors of the stuff that they did, it doesn't do enough in terms of the tonal shift to justify the clear sort of emotional beats, or dare I say manipulation that it's going for. There's a moment about 2/3 of the way through that really should be getting audible gasps and potential tears and stuff like that, but for me, certainly in the screening we were in, I didn't really get any of that from anyone. And I think it couldn't settle on a tone well enough, or it couldn't switch easily enough. It couldn't justify the switches in tone to really make the sort of second half of the movie land, I think.
Yeah, I never got that impression either when I watched the film. Like, this is the big emotional moment, the tearjerker, and I was like, oh, okay, no, I was sitting there like to myself thinking, am I just really tired? Am I just not in the mood for, to get emotionally invested? And then I think like a lot of the movies I would watch at sort of 8 o'clock or so in the morning across the film festival, whether it was something like Portrait of a Lady on Fire or The Lighthouse, those are films that I resonated with, I went along with, I got emotionally invested in. With this, I was like, God, this just isn't very good. It's very safe. And yeah, I just think it was just really kind of poor. And what I think is great is that it's finding an audience, and I think the difficulty is, I think there's multiple issues perhaps with some of the praise that's being distributed for this film. So taking aside that there are people that I know that genuinely enjoyed the film, think it was great, well done, that's the film is connected with them. I think there's an element of free passes that are being handed out to this. Like, Taika Waititi is a really personable, great character, someone that you want to see do well. I've loved to enjoyed all his films kind of previously. This one I did not, but I get the feeling that some people will go, and I've been guilty of this in the past, whether it's something maybe like a Star Trek or something that I genuinely love, and I'm like, you know what, it wasn't that bad, it was fine, I'll give you a couple of stars, give it a pass, come on, you're judging it a bit too harshly. And people do the same with things like Star Wars, etc. But I think we're now getting into sort of the thing with cinema, whether it's actors, where it could be a Timothée Chalamet or Robert Pattinson or whoever, where people will go, oh, I stan this person or director or something like that, so yeah, that's a stamp of approval, that's a stamp of approval, that's a stamp of approval, and perhaps we're not being as sort of objective as we should be with their material. That, you know, that might be the case, I think, with some of the reviews I've seen.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen sort of something this weekend where a reviewer, Robbie Collin, of the Daily Telegraph, who I personally really enjoy his writing and his reviews. I'd say probably maybe 8 times out of 10 I'll agree with his opinions, but even if I don't, he does write well enough that, you know, I'll enjoy his reviews anyway. And he gave this a 1-star review, and has now been sort of, I think this weekend, sort of been on the receiving hit of some Taika Waititi stans who maybe have potentially not even seen the movie by this point, but are immediately jumping on anyone who gives a negative review. I know that, let's say, Christopher Nolan fans can do this as well, where if you even dare criticize any aspect of this filmmaking, it's jump on it, when really it should be the starting point for discourse or a conversation about the film. You know, you can have equally different opinions. It doesn't make you right or wrong, but it's just trying to find that way of actually actively discussing and then coming to a middle ground. Whereas these people are just sort of jumping on the bandwagon and doing that. And I think what we need to sort of do is sort of come to the point where I think, yeah, he has now reached that sort of level. Obviously, you know, he's now, you know, he has done great work for me. You know, The Mandalorian, he directed the last episode of The Mandalorian, which was infinitely better than The Rise of Skywalker. And, you know, I think I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing what he does next. But just for me, this one didn't work. And, you know, that's fair enough. And, you know, part of that also comes down to, you know, for me, a big part of it was actually his portrayal of Hitler. Now, what did you make of his portrayal? Because I know it came out before the film sort of saying that he hadn't done any research into the role of Adolf Hitler. He just played it the way he wanted to play it. So what did you make of his performance as Adolf now, given, of course, that this was not the Adolf Hitler, but an imaginary friend of a member of the Hitler Youth? So it's his interpretation of Hitler.
So, my issue with Hitler, apart from, you know, well...
Oh, that Hitler.
Yeah. My issue with it was that it's very one note. And it's like at the beginning, and I think I can understand it being appealing for maybe some, you know, audience members. It's like you watch and go, oh, it's Hitler. It's like, it's quite funny, it's titillating, it's something that, you know, we don't really get subjected to, I guess. We haven't maybe seen something like this in cinema maybe since The Great Dictator to an extent. Well, on this level anyway.
Well, apart from all those downfall memes, of course.
Exactly.
You know, which JoJo Rabbit did bring back, you know.
Yeah.
It was almost one of like the original sort of memes, you know, in the sort of like that whole last decade of Hitler getting mad at everything, but which then became a total parody of himself. You know, Downfall is a fantastic movie, and that scene is great in its own respect. But then, of course, it took on a life of its own with everything. But yeah, no, I think it's just something for me. What it was he starts off playing it maybe too broad, and then similarly when Hitler starts to get mad and angry in the second half of the movie, it just doesn't work for me. Did you find that?
Yeah, I just find it was just too much after a while. It was just like, oh yeah, the kind of joke's a bit boring, just like kind of reel it in a little bit. It just becomes like, at the beginning is that sort of titillating, amusing thing, and then it just becomes quite tired quite quickly, which you know, it's a fine performance, but it's just maybe a little less Hitler would be a bit better Hitler.
A little less Hitler. That's a great piece of advice for all filmmaking going forward. And speaking of tired, you know, I love Sam Rockwell, but you know, you don't hear it, but do we really need any more Sam Rockwell movies where he's playing a sort of racist bully who actually has a heart of gold?
Yeah, he's kind of found himself a bit typecast to an extent, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, there was some sort of high points for me. I thought he was good in the film. I thought Stephen Merchant's, his sort of one scene in a very sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark-esque sort of SS Gestapo officer was great. You know, Scarlett Johansson's being talked about for potential sort of Oscars and stuff and supporting role for this one. You know, this is part of the sort of Oscar season double bill of films where she ties people's shoelaces. Where does it rank for you compared to her work in Marriage Story, say?
I think it's a bit laughable, to be honest, that this role is kind of being talked about for Oscars. Maybe the Golden Globes or something like that for a comedy role, but come on, it's not that great a performance for the Oscar standards. There's a lot of better films and a lot of better actresses that could be nominated than Scarlett Johansson for this. Marriage Story hands down deserves it, but this, come on, it's just like you almost feel like saying to some people, go see more things, see more talent. Like this isn't. If this is the top 5, if this is in your top 5 performance, then what are you doing?
Yeah, no, I think I haven't seen all of the films yet that are sort of eligible for the Oscars and stuff like this, but I think she has been nominated for a Golden Globe, but I think it'll probably end there for this, because I don't think it's a strong enough performance really to do. She's meant to be the sort of heart and soul of the film, and I just don't think it works really for this. But that sort of brings us on to the sort of the main roles of the film and the sort of the kid actors here. What did you make of them? We had, including sort of Thomasin McKenzie is the Jewish girl who lives in the roof. What did you make of them?
Yeah, I thought they were the highlights of the film. I think, was it the slightly fat chubby one's going to be the new Kevin in the Home Alone reboot? So if you thought JoJo Rabbit was a bad idea potentially, then that's a hell of a worse idea. No offense to the actor, it's just the whole concept of a Home Alone reboot. We don't need that. But I thought Thomasin McKenzie was excellent. She's kind of continuing a nice run of form with like Leave No Trace. So I'm kind of curious to see her continue to develop. I think with Leave No Trace, I think she was in The King, which I haven't seen yet. She seems to be getting a lot of praise and attention. So I'm excited to sort of see her transition from sort of young child star to potentially a more established kind of character actress.
Yeah, I think in terms of just pure performance, I think she was one of the real highlights of the film. I thought she managed to get like the tone right, and that she was sort of vulnerable and sympathetic, but also was able to find the right sort of veins of humour to go down. I thought Roman Griffiths-Davis was good in the lead role, but unfortunately for me, like you say, Home Alone reboot is a bad idea, because I just cannot see how that can work in today's culture of internet, social media, mobile phones and whatever. You would always be able to get a hold of someone, so it's going to be interesting to see what route they go down. But this is a really, really horrible thing to say, but the character of Yorkie, I really wanted him to die at the end of the movie. I really wanted him to get blown up by that rocket launcher he was carrying. I just really found that kid so, not the kid, but the character so annoying that I wanted him to die, and that's not something I would ever think to inflict misery and death on a child. But for me, he was just insufferable for me in this film. And he sort of looks like a sort of baby sort of Nick Frost, so I can imagine that in the future he might sort of go down that route. But for me, I think that this film failed to show the true horror of war and the Holocaust. And I think if they had just sacrificed and bumped off one more kid, it might have hit home a bit more about what was potentially to be lost by sort of joining the Hitler Youth and stuff like that. So I would have killed him off, but that's just me. Is that a bad thing to say? I don't know.
Das ist nicht so gut, Dallas.
Well. So in conclusion, where did this sort of rank for you on sort of Letterboxd? What rating did you give this one?
A lowly 2 for me, Dallas.
Yeah, it was a 2 for me as well. There is some good performances and some merit to it. It's going to be interesting to see. I saw some people sort of saying that this film should be played in schools to teach people about the Holocaust and stuff like that. And it's like, really, this is the film you're going to use? I can see why it's a more easy sell. It's a bit light and fluffy, and you can get people in, and it kind of get them asking some questions. But I think there's other films out there, such as Downfall, or even maybe something like The Boy with the Striped Pajamas, that can give a different perspective to the Holocaust and whatever that kids would do it. So I can't see that happening in the future, but I can see it's going to be interesting. We're recording this just before the Golden Globes go out, so we're unable to know who the winners are yet, but I guess we'll find out on a future episode what we made of those, and see if JoJo Rabbit does make any more inroad into the Oscar race, but it was a 2-star movie for me as well. But moving on from something that we both didn't enjoy to something that we have enjoyed and want to let you know about is, so in 2019 we gave you our 52 films by women recommendations every week. And this year we're widening our remit to shine a spotlight on just something that we've enjoyed and want to share with you each week. So Lee, this could be, say, a classic film or a TV show or a cinema event that's coming up. So Lee, what are you recommending for us this week?
So this one will be no surprise, and we'll go into it in more detail probably later in the month. But Uncut Gems begins its sort of cinematic rollout from the 10th, so in a few days' time. So I would encourage people to go along and see that. So while it has had a release sort of since Christmas Day in America, I can think of no better way to spend Christmas Day than that, to be honest. The UK will be getting it on Netflix on the 31st, and I would encourage people to go along and see it in the cinema. So it's not one of these tired ones of like, you should go see this film in the cinema, because that doesn't always apply. But I think in this film's case, it's a shared experience, and I think the stress and anxiety of watching Uncut Gems is best watched in that sort of cinema environment. I think it's a testament to the Safdie brothers that a film like this just absolutely is about going along to the cinema, catching a film, sharing an experience, coming out of it. I think me and you both compared sort of, we have like Fitbit style watches. Oh my god, look at my heart rate at the end of this film. I think it's it was my second favourite film of last year, and I think it could be some of people's potential best film of the year. So I'd highly encourage people to go along and check that out. So that'll be in UK cinemas from Friday.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be catching this one again over that weekend, along with 1917. I'm really excited to see it in the cinema again. I'm hoping for a busy screening, just so I can also maybe sort of kind of watch other people's reactions to it, because it was just such a intense film to watch first time round. And I think at the moment in the US, I think it's made about nearly $40 million, I think it is. And, you know, it's going to be one of A24's biggest hits in the US, along with Lady Bird and Hereditary, I think. And, you know, people are going to see this film. I mean, a lot of it is potentially down to the fact it's an Adam Sandler film, given by the C+ cinema score that everyone keeps talking about. It's maybe not the film that they were expecting to see from an Adam Sandler movie. But hey, you know, once they're in the movie and have paid their money, hey, it doesn't matter. But, you know, this is going to be very interesting. They said it could have been one of A24's biggest hits worldwide. I don't think that will happen, because they're basically everywhere else in the world is getting it on Netflix with only limited cinema releases. But I know that Aberdeen Belmont Filmhouse has it on the 10th. I think Filmhouse in Edinburgh has it on the 17th.
I know, so I can't believe Aberdeen gets to be the big dog this week. It's so typical.
Woo. I know we're normally behind on everything, but, you know, we've won that battle. So yeah, no, that's good. So, and I think there's a couple of screenings in Glasgow as well. If you're Scotland based, you should be able to see it, but if not, then like you say, Netflix on the 31st of December, and not December, 31st of January. I'm thinking it was last year already. I've lost track of the days. It's every day's a Sunday at the moment, but it is a Sunday, so that's fine. But my recommendation for the week is a film which I only realised after we recorded our Best of 2019 and Best of the Decade episode that I'd forgotten to put this on my list, and it would have been in my top 5. So I'm going to recommend it now, and that is Your Name by Matoko Shinkai. And this is an anime film, and it starts off as a traditional Japanese sort of body swap comedy, but then sort of turns into something unexpected and sort of really sort of warming, emotional, and potentially heartbreaking as well. And it was one of my favourite films of 2016, and one of my favourite films of the decade. I would have probably put it around about number 4 or 5. So I basically had to redo my entire list that I did through on Twitter for this. But the reason I'm sort of recommending it now is because I rewatched it again because I'm going to Tokyo in Japan in April, and also this filmmaker has a new film coming out called Weathering with You, and that is out on limited release from the 17th of January, and I think Cineworld have a 1-day screening of it around about the end of January, I think, in every cinema. And also I think some Scotland of anime screenings are going around Scotland as well this month, so you should be able to catch that one as well. It's getting rave reviews as well. So if you loved Your Name, you'll love Weathering with You. If you haven't seen Your Name yet, please do go and see it, because it's an absolutely fantastic film. So have you seen that one yet?
I have not. I'm trying to remember. It was. You said it came out last year, did you?
No, I think it was maybe. I think it might have come out in 2017 in the UK, I think.
Yeah, I did see that, because I was sitting there thinking, like, I'm sure I saw that.
This sounds very familiar.
Because I'm pretty sure in typical terms that was in my, like, top 25 of, like, 2017 or something like that. Yeah. I really enjoyed that one. So, yeah, I'll have to check this one out too.
Yeah, no, it's an older film, but, that's what we're going to do. We're going to sort of shine light, all the big name films, we'll be discussing and reviewing them on the show, but we want to shine a spotlight on other ones that you may have missed. And of course, we'll probably each be doing the 52 films by women thing, so you can, if you follow us on Letterboxd or Twitter, I'm sure we'll have threads of them going along as well. But that brings us to the end of this episode. Now we're going to be back in the pod booth in 2 weeks' time to discuss 1917 and Uncut Gems in a full review. But we're not here next week because we're bringing you an exclusive interview with the cast and crew of Waves, which Lee was lucky enough to conduct at the London Film Festival. So do you want to quickly tease what people are going to hear next week?
Yeah, this is going to be... I haven't seen a trailer yet for it in the UK. I really hope people will go and check out Waves. So it's the latest film from Trey Edward Schultz. So it's about a black suburban family that find themselves torn apart by a tragedy. So obviously it's just going to be myself next week, but to replace Dallas and Kim, I need to get in some real A-listers. So I've got writer-director Trey Edward Schultz, Kelvin Harrison Jr., Taylor Russell, Sterling K. Brown, and Renee Elsie Gosbury. So a hell of a guest list next week. So yeah, definitely one to check out. So check out the film. It'll be out from a week on Friday. So get there. You'll be able to download our podcast a few days early. You can enjoy a bit of spoiler-free chat with me and the director first, see the film, and then come back for some in-depth spoiler discussions with the cast. So yeah, it's a hell of a movie, and it was a really wonderful conversation to be part of.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to this. I haven't listened to this one yet. He sent me the audio for it, but I've been holding off because I haven't seen Waves yet. I was unlucky to miss that at the festival, but I think I have seen the poster has arrived at my local Cineworld, so there's fingers crossed it will be screening from the 17th. But I'm excited to see the interviews, even though Lee has told me he did not ask Sterling K. Brown what exactly happened to his character at the end of Predator, because I still don't know, and I think if he had asked him, I think Sterling K. Brown would not have been able to tell you either. So unfortunately, that mystery will remain unsolved, but I'm looking forward to hearing what the cast and crew have to say about Waves, and I'll be, like I say, so listen to the first part with Trey Edward Schultz, press pause, watch the film, and come back to the second part afterwards. But we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about 1917 and Uncut Gems, because this is how we win. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd Party.